Good afternoon, everybody. This is Steve Wilson at the Illinois State Water Survey, and you're attending a webinar on septic systems. It's hosted by the Water Survey and the Illinois Water Resources Center at the U of I. It's 1 o'clock, so I think we'll just get started. And a few things I'll go through here at the beginning before we get into the septic issues, but I want to let everybody know this is part of the Private Well Class program, which it's a website, privatewellclass.org, if you haven't signed up for the classes. Certainly if you have a private well, please do so. And this work is funded and sponsored by the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, which is a national technical assistance and training organization that has staff in every state, and the funding comes from the US EPA through their Technical Assistance and Training Grant Program. Okay. Technology challenge sometimes. So today's webinar, as I said, is part of a national program. Our website, privatewellclass.org, has several videos up from lessons that we've done in the past. We're currently trying to work on, this is the fourth in this past year since July, that are question and answer webinars meant to provide you an opportunity to ask us questions. And in that vein, today we have a licensed septic installer and inspector from Illinois, Ron Helton from D&D Sewer Service in Lincoln, Illinois, who at the end of this will be here to help answer questions. I'm a groundwater hydrologist, and septic issues are one of my weak links, if you will. So Ron is here to help answer any tough questions you might have for us. This is being recorded, and it will be available on our website. We've had a number of questions regarding that because the way things work, people can't make events when they think they are, so there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions as well. Okay, the private well class, I just want to quickly mention, it's 10 lessons. It's self-paced. Privatewellclass.org. You sign up with your name and your state of origin, and it sends you one lesson a week for 10 weeks. It starts out talking about groundwater and groundwater flow and how it gets into your well, and it ends with water treatment. So it goes through the whole gamut of maintenance, issues you might have with your pumps, source water issues, how water flows to your well, things you need to be careful of around your well, how to sample, and all the health issues related to ensuring the quality of your drinking water. And so go to privatewellclass.org, check that out if you're not already involved with the classes, and let us know what you think. This is the front page when you go there. It's just, again, privatewellclass.org, and you click on this large banner. It says click here to enroll for free, and it takes you to this page where we just need an email address so that we can send you the lessons each week. Regarding the webinar today, on your sidebar, on the right side for the GoToWebinar window, there is a questions box and a chat box. Use the question box to ask questions that may come up during the webinar today, or things that are unclear. And what we'll do, when you registered for this webinar, there was a link there to ask questions in advance, and so we put some of those in this presentation, and either Ron or I will answer those, and then we'll take the other questions that we received today, and we'll go through those last. So we will try to get to what we can, and I'll tell you now if there's a question that we can't answer or that I can answer specifically, we'll take your information and we'll find it and get back to you. So, all right, septic systems. So basically, your septic system is the other part of your drinking water system. Like a community water supply has wells or surface water intakes, and then they treat their water to make it safe for people to drink, and then it goes through their wastewater system before it's discharged back into the environment. A private well and septic system work the same way. You are using your well to get water from groundwater from the ground, and then once you've used it, it goes into your septic system, which is a wastewater treatment system. And there, bacteria naturally degrade the wastewater and reduce that material so that it can infiltrate into the natural groundwater system, and it's harmless, it's natural, and it's a process that can go on forever, minus the solids that are in your system that we'll talk about in a little bit. So the tank, you have a tank and a drain field. So there's two pieces. The solids fall out into the tank. That's what requires most of the maintenance, and that's where the bacteria do their job. And then the liquid goes into the drain field and infiltrates into the ground. All right. It's a very simple system, and it works really well as long as it's maintained and taken care of. And that's really where the problem comes in. Here's an example I took this from the National Environmental Services Center, one of their web pages on septic systems, and I'll talk more about them at the end. But here's what a typical system looks like. This actually has two compartments for the septic tank, but the material comes in from the left from your toilet or your shower or your sink. The solids fall out. The liquids are treated. There's bacteria growing in there, and then it runs out into your septic line, your soil absorption field here, where the perforated pipe allows it then to percolate into the ground, and Mother Nature does her job. Another example on the left is a one compartment tank, and you can see the sludge on the bottom, and there's always things floating as well. And so usually those outlet pipes and inlet pipes are perforated as well, are screened so that we have a problem. This is supposed to be well, hang on for a minute, folks. We'll have to, this is going to happen throughout the webinar, unfortunately. This is supposed to be a 500-seat license. So we'll have to figure out what's going on. All right, so and as it says here at the bottom, you can see there's, the absorption field. There's two designs here. I know Ron will be able to talk about. There's also a compartment design that I wasn't aware of. But typically, the water, you have gravel around your drain field and around your system so that it has more area to percolate into the ground and infiltrate. Wow. Okay. And as it says here at the bottom, there are over 25 million homes that have septic systems in the U.S. It's assumed that about 1 in 4 homes are on a septic system, according to the U.S. EPA. Okay. So when they fail, so when a septic system fails, you know it. Many of you probably experienced this. The area around your tank or the drain field, you may notice that your yard has very thick grass, or I'm going to try something here. Oh, they can't? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I have a pop-up window that keeps popping up because we're over our limit for the number of attendees. And so I assumed everyone could see that, but I guess not. So I will move on. So in your yard, you may see this deep green grass, and that's usually a sign that some of that nutrient-rich material is seeping up out of the tank, or it's not getting in the drain field where it belongs, or you might even be at the point where there's a pool of water, and it usually smells, and you can tell it's from your septic, or if it's not quite to the pooling point, you may walk out around your septic tank, and the ground will be spongy and soft, and you can tell there's something going on as far as it being fairly liquid, if you will. In worst case, about 10% of homes, they say, have had septic back up into their house because of improper maintenance and not understanding how to maintain your system. And this can all be prevented just by maintaining this simple system, as I mentioned before. Okay, so sizing and design is one of the issues. Maybe you bought a house in the country and it had 2 people in it before, and now you've got a family of 5 or 6 there, or these are designed for a number of usually by bedrooms, and how often they get pumped. I'll show you a diagram in a minute, but if things have changed in your situation or the home since the septic system was installed, you need to know how it was designed and if it's sized properly so that you understand how often you need to pump the solids. Because as the solids fill up in a tank, then more mixed up, if you will, more thicker material will start going out into your drain field. And when that starts happening and some of that thicker material can actually plug that, then you'll be at a point where you need a new system. And so maintaining that and making sure that the tank is maintained such that there's free water flow into your drain field is really important. Public health protection, obviously the whole point of understanding and having this done properly is so that you don't have to worry about bacteria contamination of your well or drinking water. And also regulations have changed in the past. Most septic systems are more than 30 years old, some much older than that. And so the impact that may have if it's not properly designed and if the well's nearby, those are issues that you just need to be aware of, and how it might affect the environment or other wells. And maintenance. Maintenance is probably the biggest issue. Wells or septic systems that are maintained properly function for a long time and the way they're supposed to. Okay. So sizing and design. As I said, it's important to know mainly for the standpoint of how often to pump the solids out of your tank. Every tank fills up with solids eventually. You can't go forever. How often that happens depends on the size. And there's a diagram I'll show you in a minute that explains that. And there's guidelines for how often it should be pumped. But suffice it to say, if it's been more than 4 or 5 years since you've pumped your tank, you should at least have it inspected, and which that's actually recommended every year. But you could be at risk of something bad basically happening. Also, is your drain field designed properly? What we found is that many of these really old systems, there is no drain field, like the one we showed a minute ago. Instead, there's a line that goes straight to a field tile, which may run through a field and disperse, or may run straight to a ditch and empty into a ditch or a stream. And for folks that live near a river or stream, many older homes were designed with the line going straight to the bank, where it discharges straight into the river or stream. And that's very bad. In most places, it's illegal these days, just because of E. coli and the other things that might get into our natural environment from that. So for the public health standpoint, again, if you have a straight pipe that goes to some surface water body, not only consider the impact on the environment, but again, it may be illegal. There are new regulations on discharge and what systems need to do. And in some areas, I know folks have been given by their county maybe 3 or 4 years to come up to code. And when it's an expensive process, obviously, but it's something that needs to be done to protect the environment. Many people don't even know where their drain field or their tank is. That's obviously a problem. You need to understand the groundwater flow direction. We mentioned that in our class. Understanding the groundwater flow direction tells you what's going on. How close are you to your neighbor's well? We've been working with a health official who is working with a small community all of the houses in this community of 300 homes are on private wells and septic. Their wells are shallow, it's shallow bedrock, and now they're having E. coli and coliform contamination in a number of the wells. Well, in that sort of situation, it's really worst case. With shallow bedrock, water flows and fractures can't disperse uniformly, and because it's so shallow, that water infiltrating out of the septic systems has nowhere to go but into the same fractures where water is being pulled for drinking water wells. So knowing that information and how close your neighbor's well is and their septic may impact the quality of your drinking water. And also, in some cases, your well may be several hundred feet deep and your septic is discharging near the surface, and it may have no impact even if they're right next to each other. But you need to understand if that's a sand and gravel well that's only screened in the lower 10 feet and it's 200 feet deep, that means the water is coming in your well at 190 feet versus a bedrock well that may only have 40 feet of casing and the other 160 feet is just a drilled hole in the bedrock. Then you're at risk. And so understanding how those things work together and how your well could be impacted by your septic are considerations, again, for your health. And the bottom line is, if there's any question at all, have your well tested, and you should have it tested once a year anyway for nitrate and coliform as an indicator that there might be a problem. Okay, maintenance. This is basically the rest of what we're going to talk about today. They have to be managed, as I said before, just like your water system does, and they will eventually fail, just like your well will eventually fail. And how you maintain that and how you manage that will determine how long they last in most cases. A well may only last 15 or 20 years if it's not taken care of and things aren't done as they're supposed to. Same with the septic system, less than that. So your drain field gets plugged, there's no way to unplug it. And so you have to take care of those things. And to do that, again, pumping out the solids on a regular schedule depending on the size of your tank. Don't put things, anything you don't need to, down your drain or in any of your toilet or your shower, anywhere that runs into your system. And, it's a natural system, so toxics have an effect. Other things like even coffee grounds or cat litter or grease really can affect that. Grease is a real problem for public water utilities as well. And if you have bacon grease, it should go in your, it's interesting. I'm not sure what just happened. Sorry about that. But following best practices will help your system work properly. Okay, so here's, this is also from the National Environmental Services Center. They have a brochure that goes out 4 times a year called Pipeline, and this is from the fall 2004. It was devoted to septic issues, and this is one guideline on how often you might need to pump your tank. And if you read up here at the top, it says, these assume there's no garbage disposal in use. Garbage disposals are really bad because they increase the number of solids that get into your system. They're not readily broken down. It's not like once they get into that anoxic condition in the bottom of your tank. So using a garbage disposal, if you use it regularly, will severely reduce the amount of time between when you need your tank pumped. And so these are some guidelines, and by number of people, that's based on flushes and showers and cooking and all those things. And so you can see that if you have a small tank, like a 500-gallon tank, and you have more than 3 or 4 people, this is something you have to deal with every year. And if there's 2 people and they're on a very large tank, it could go for more than a decade without needing to be pumped. And so I know one of the questions we were asked in advance was, how often should I pump my tank? this is one guide that will help you, and I'll bring out another one in a little bit that's available. Okay, so on your septic to-do list, some things I haven't mentioned yet. One, around your tank and drain field, your tank should have an inspection port and a manhole for pumping it. Make sure those are accessible always, and you should be using your inspection port to either yourself or hiring a contractor to come out and determine the sludge layer and how thick it is, maybe annually, so that you have a better idea of how often you need to pump your tank out. But you should only have grass. If you have trees, that roots can get into the system, and in most cases that's really bad. They plug the lines, they interfere with the natural work of the system, and no concrete or asphalt. That's not only as a surface, but also buildings. It takes away from the natural infiltration, and it compacts the soil so that water can't flow in. Part of this whole process is, especially in your drain field, the water that infiltrates is also being pushed through the system by the rainfall coming from the surface, and so you really want to be careful about really where your tank and your drain field are. You should just have grass and nothing else. That's the best way to go. Reduce the flow of water into your system. You shouldn't have your sump pump or whirlpool or water softener, any of those things, downspouts, nothing in addition should be going through your system that doesn't need to. They cause a high volume of water which mixes in the tank. It could increase the number of minute solids that are mixed up and getting into your drain field rather than being treated in your tank. And so your system will work longer on its own without needing pumped if you reduce the flow in your tank as much as you can. Only put wastewater, which is from all your sinks and drains, in your septic system. Again, a garbage disposal dramatically increases the amount of solids in your tank, which means it needs to be pumped more frequently. There's a lot of questions about using additives, even baker's yeast and things like that. There's no evidence that they help at all. There's some anecdotal evidence that it can actually harm your system and the natural bacteria that are working in your tank. It's not yeast in your septic tank that's doing the work for treating your system. So to think that yeast would help, it will not. There are also chemical additives that are sold, and all the research shows that they don't necessarily do any good. And also no man-made stuff. Paint. Don't put pills down your toilet. A lot of pharmaceuticals can interfere or kill bacteria, and so you need to be careful with all those things. And again, inspect your tank regularly to measure the solid level in the bottom of your tank, so you pump it before it gets too full. If your solids level builds up, that's less volume in your tank that's available for the free water that's coming in, and it'll increase the amount of solids that actually are getting into your drain field, or can. So that's really the gist of what you need to do to maintain your septic system, or I'm sure I've missed some things, but I wanted to spend a little time providing resources that are available. A few years ago, EPA came out with the Septic Smart program, and the link's down at the bottom. We'll have this stuff on our webpage. Currently on privatewellclass.org, we have a resources page that lists all the resources for the 10 lessons, but we're going to add some resources at the bottom that are from these presentations where the material isn't necessarily covered as intensely in the class lessons. Septic systems weren't one of the things we tackled very thoroughly in the lessons because there's other information out there. And here's a good example of something it's worth your time. There's not only are there information on these web pages about the basics of how your system works and why you need to maintain it and what you can do, but they've developed a bunch of resources. There's a 12-page, I think, manual that really puts everything in perspective and shows some of the latest findings and all that information. And it's just, there's a lot of good resources here if you're concerned about your septic system. Another example, or another really good page, is the National Environmental Services Center has a septic system page. They actually do a lot of wastewater work, both on-site and centralized wastewater, and have a ton of resources available about those issues. And so this is their septic page. NESE is just nesc.vdu.edu. If you go to their website, there's a Google search thing at the top here like this shows, and you type septic systems and it'll take you right to it. This page goes on. I only did a screenshot of the upper part. There's a lot more information further below, and it's really worth spending some time. And they also have engineers on staff that can answer questions for you specifically about wastewater issues. So they put a lot. NESE's been in business, if you will, for a long time, decades, and so they have gathered a lot of good resources. They're kind of a clearinghouse of information, and you can spend a lot of time looking at information on their website. Recently, NRWA came out with an app, and I downloaded this on my Android Samsung Galaxy S4 phone to take these screenshots, and took a look at how it works. And it's got the figure on the left here shows some of the basics that they provide, sizing the tank and drain field, septic pumping schedule, how to measure the size of your tank if you don't know how big it is, and how to locate your tank if you don't know. And we'll talk about some of that in the questions, I believe. But then when you click on one of those with your phone, it takes you to more pages. Most of this really is use it once and you probably won't use it again. But there is a inspection thing, which I think is on my next slide. Yeah, where you can, there's a series of questions you can answer kind of to self-evaluate your situation and how your system looks. They're very basic questions. Some of them are very, is there a strong sewage odor, for instance? You have a problem if you have that issue. So, but whenever at the bottom of each of those pages under public health, surface water, and the other terms here, you can click on additional resources, and it gives you a little summary of information. And again, they link at the bottom to the Small Flow Clearinghouse, which is part of that National Environmental Services Center page where the septic system information I just showed was. And they also link to Septic Smart, which is EPA's new program. And so between those resources, there's a lot of information and help available for everyone, certainly to answer basic questions. And what I always recommend to folks, especially with our class, is usually local resources are best. And even though there's a lot of web information available, and in today's day and age, most people use the web first rather than pick up a phone, especially for local issues or conditions or what your regulations are, all those sorts of things. One of these four resources is probably your best bet. Your county and public health department, if your laws require them, may even have your septic information on file. Co-op Extension Service has a lot of resources related to septic issues, especially in rural areas and on farms. You can call your state wastewater agency. They regulate community wastewater systems, but they'll know who to get you in contact with on the private well side, or in some states, both the community water supply and private well and wastewater agencies are one and the same, a Department of Health or that sort of group. And your licensed septic inspector and installer, one of the questions we're going to ask Ron at the end is, if I need to go hire a septic installer, what kind of questions should I ask them to make sure they understand, that I can be sure they know what they're doing. And hopefully you'll be able to help us with that. So there's a lot of information available, and there's people you can talk to locally. and that's the best thing to do. So we're going to take a few minute break, and again we have Ron Helton from D&D Sewer Service with us. We'll get him on the line, and we'll start going through some of the questions, and then we'll take any questions that we received. And so if you have questions, be sure and ask. And again, thanks for attending. So we'll take a few minute break here, and I show that it's here's the first set of questions. It's 1:30 on the button, so at 1:35 we'll come back and continue. All right. I want to make sure, Ron, are you on the phone?
Yeah.
All right, great. Let's give everybody one more minute here.
I'm just heading back to my computer. You didn't close all that, did you?
Ron, if for some reason your computer's off, we can I can read you the questions.
No, it's good.
All right. All right. So again, we have Ron Helton with us, who runs is a licensed sewer sewage inspector and installer. And so, Ron, can you see the questions? I'll just let you go if you are so inclined.
Okay, so the first question is, how do we get rid of tree roots? Well, a lot of times the only way to get rid of tree roots is to dig up the pipe that the tree roots are infiltrating and maybe install clean out. And then there's some line cleaning equipment that has a tree root cutter on it, and you run that equipment down the line and cut the tree roots out, actually. Sometimes the tree roots are so bad, they're infiltrating the line so bad that the only way to get rid of them is to replace the system. But tree roots can definitely be a problem as far as that stuff goes.
Well, and they can also come back. That's the...
Yeah, right. Even though you cut them out, they could also they come back. You know, it's not a dead. As long as the tree's there, the tree roots will grow back. So it's a reoccurring issue.
Yeah, the best thing is just to not have any trees nearby, and I know that sometimes isn't an option. But anyway, yeah. All right.
The next question, what is the best way to measure the sludge in your tank? Well, really, you should get a professional contractor to come out and take a look at that for you. But if you do want to attempt it yourself, what you can do is get something that's kind of flat on the bottom and then push it down into your tank, and you can feel it go through the solids on top, and then you'll feel a water layer in the center, and then the sludge layer on bottom. And then once you feel the sludge layer, you would mark that spot on a stick, and then continue shoving the instrument down to the bottom of the tank and mark that spot on a stick, and then measure the two lines, and that would give you the amount of sludge in the bottom of the tank. So, you know, that's kind of how you determine how much sludge is in the tank, I guess.
And that all assumes that you know the dimensions of your tank and all those sorts of things too. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the key is there's a floatable layer on top usually, and there's the sinkable sludge layer on bottom. And there's actually the baffle that comes into the tank and down about 40% the depth of the tank. And actually what's in the middle of the tank is fairly clear, clean water. And that's what you want going out. So the key is to keep the top floatable layer and the bottom sludge layer as far as possible. That way, the closer those two layers get together, the more of that kind of material is making it out into your lateral field. And that's actually what eventually causes them to sludge up or become matted up and fail. So.
All right. So this next question, someone asked, you know, they're trying to determine which professional to hire, so to speak. So, you know, what are some good questions that they should be able to ask that? Like if someone was going to ask you questions to know that, you know, you actually know what you're talking about.
Well, you could, you know, start out by asking them what type of systems they install, because there's actually several different systems, and you know, from a conventional system, which we've been kind of talking about, to an aerobic system, which is basically just the same thing with an air pump on it, so it changes the type of bacteria in the tank. And then, you know, you could ask them how long they've been in business, how many systems they've installed, have they had any systems, you know, prematurely fail, and what were the reasons. You know, the other thing I would definitely do is go talk to your local health department, because most of the time these guys are regulated by the county or the state, and you know, they can give you, you know, have they ever been cited for whatever, you know, different violations, you know. And you just pick someone that would has been in business a while. You don't want to pick the guy this is his first day on the job. So, you know, that's just my take on it.
Sounds good. Okay, so I'm going to go to the next page here. Okay. So will you be offering this as a class as well as a webinar? Probably not right now. Eventually we may do that. I do plan to put like the resources we talked about today and some of those links on our resources page so that folks can find that information. But we haven't built a lesson around septic systems as yet. So, so the next question is, what's okay to put down my sink? You know, from everything that I know, and it's all from reading and not as much from practice, is that you really don't want to put anything you don't need to. Ron?
Yeah, that's, I mean, yeah, you can definitely tell if somebody, as soon as I dig their tank up and look in the tank, I can tell if they have a garbage disposal, or you know, if they've been dumping stuff down there that they shouldn't be dumping down there, because the tank will be real heavy with solids or sludge usually, and then the bacteria, you know, if they've been dumping bleach and stuff, or they use lots of bleach in their system, you know, you won't see the bacteria in there moving around. I mean, what should you dump down your sink? Water and soap only, you know, and try to limit the use of antibacterial soap, because of course your system works on bacteria, and the more antibacterial stuff you put down, you know, the harder those bacteria have of staying alive. So as little as possible. Soap and water, that's pretty much all you want to put down your sink.
Okay, and I think we've already answered this, but I included it because it was a question we got in advance. But do additives help my system? And again, everything that I've found, even in the scientific literature, says that, you know, they don't help, and some things have actually proven to be harmful. So I don't know if you have anything to add, but the system's supposed to work on its own, and if it's in balance like it's supposed to be, and you're not putting things you're not supposed to down there, the bugs or the bacteria will do their job. I think that's the solution there. There we go. Okay, these are the last two we have from prior to today. Ron, I assume that, you know, you can certainly burn grass and some of those things from.
Yeah, can septic kill trees if directly downstream from my septic tank? Well, I guess it depends on what kind of tree it is, and you know how old the tree is and all that kind of stuff. You could definitely flood out and kill any plant really, pretty much. So yeah, I guess you could kill a tree with your septic water if you gave it too much. So.
Well, and this last question, you know, if someone came to you and said, I have these awful smells coming back up through my toilet, you're going to assume there's some kind of clogging going on, I assume?
Yeah, if somebody tells me they got a terrible sewer smell in their house, it's usually either you got a dried up floor drain, so you can run around and pour a little water in all your drains actually. You know, if you ain't used one for a while, the water evaporates in the trap and then allows the smell to come back in your house. Or the plumbing may be improperly vented. So if you don't have vent pipes and all that stuff on your house, or if you have a plug in a vent pipe, then the smell could you know, possibly make it back into your house. So, you know, there's a few things you can try before you call a professional. Just run around, dump a little water in all your traps, and, you know, flush the toilet. If you hear gurgling and bubbling, that means either A, your septic tank's full and over full, or B, you have a plug in the tank. So.
All right. We have got a few questions today. So I'm going to bring up our Google Doc that we're sharing to, if I could figure this out here, full screen. Okay. The first question is, what about using, what?
Could you make it larger?
Oh, sure. How do I do that? Hang on one second, because I'm zooming out here. How's that? Is that better? What is that, copper?
That's copper sulfate.
Well, sulfate is SO4, so that's why I was confused. So yeah, go ahead, Pete, Ron. If you, this really isn't a septic question, I guess, but.
No, we do a lot of drain cleaning and stuff too. So I'm a little familiar with what he's asking. But you know, if you dump this stuff down your septic lines, I guess you're also taking a chance of killing the bacteria that's actually treating the water. And then even if you put the copper sulfate down the septic pipe and to kill the roots, you still got to get the roots out of there to unplug the system. So, you know, does it do any good? And maybe you could run a piece of copper wire along the drain field, you know, during installation to keep the tree roots away. And, you know, I've never seen a study or anything on it, but that's a good point for sure.
All right. Well, I assume the next question about bleach would be the same as you answered before about antibacterial soap. You just want to use as little as need be. It's certainly not something you should add. If you're using bleach like in your dish, in your washer, you know, got to wet your wipes.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to get away from it, you know, even if you know that you shouldn't be using it. And yeah, that's what I always recommend to my customers is to just keep it to a minimum. You know, if you have to use some, use it, but try not to use, you know, a gallon a day because it's definitely bad for your system.
Okay, and septic safe alternatives to bleach?
I don't know of any
I don't know either.
safe alternatives. I've never you know, checked into it much, but haven't heard of any.
The next question, I don't know, do you run across where the septic's out in somebody's pasture or that sort of thing very often?
Yeah, I have actually. People do put them in their pastures, and I don't know that it hurts anything other than, you know, maybe it creates a soft spot, so it's, you know, bad for the animals. They may crush the drain field depending upon what type you have. And the other thing is it's kind of salty. I've seen in several instances actually where deer come up out of the woods and they'll smell the salt below the surface and pull the laterals up so they could drink the water. So, you know, I'm assuming most livestock like salt the same, so maybe they might do the same thing. So, you know, if you could keep them out of your pasture, you'd be better off.
Yeah, I'm assuming a truck is a bad idea, especially if it's heavy.
Yeah, trucks are definitely bad ideas. You know, they'll crush the lateral, and wherever they crush that lateral, you know, if it's 10 feet from the tank, now you only have 10 feet of lateral trying to absorb that same amount of water. So driving on them and heavy equipment and stuff like that, you should try to avoid for sure.
All right. I don't know what CCLS is, so I don't know, hopefully you do.
No, I don't know what CCLS is either. So
all right. Well,
maybe we'll have to do a little research on that one and get back to them.
Yeah. If whoever asked that question would just send us an email at info@privatewellclass.org. We can look into it. So, okay. I'm reading the next question. So basically they have an old concrete septic tank and they want to know about filling it in.
Oh yeah, sure. They're saying they have.
So then it's an old, you know, they found the old port and now they're on city sewer. And it's an old concrete system.
So let me read that question, Steve, one more time. And
all right.
I'll get right back.
The next question is about, and I'm just going to take some time here. Do you know a good source of lists of recommended cleaning products for people on septics? You know, we haven't researched that, but that's probably a good idea. And we will look into that and actually try to put something together. There certainly are a lot of green products out there, and whether they actually are meant for septics or have some benefit there, I just don't know. And we'd have to probably look at the manufacturers and talk to some folks like the health department, EPA, to find out. So,
Okay, I read the question there, and I think I got what they're saying. Their house was switched from septic to city sewer, and they left the tank there because it was under the concrete pad, is what it sounds like. Yeah, you could certainly fill that tank in with sand or gravel or whatever. In Illinois, what they have us do as installers is we break the tank up, and then you can backfill with dirt or sand, clean fill over the top of the system. And the reason they have you break it up is so it becomes unwater tight. That way it doesn't hold 4 foot or 5 foot deep of water in the ground, and then in the future, the next homeowner or whoever may be walking over the tank, and the tank collapse in on them and they fall into the water. So, if you can, it would be advised to crush the tank in and then fill it.
oh, that's my bad. Okay, so the last question is it necessary or desirable to insulate the mound or tank in the winter?
I don't know that it's necessary, but what I went to a seminar that a guy from the University of Minnesota put on, and they were actually doing a study on this. Should you insulate the area over the top of your septic tank in the wintertime to help promote a warmer environment so the bacteria can grow? And in Illinois, usually the tanks are a couple of feet deep in the frost lines, only a couple of feet deep around this area. So, we don't do that here, but maybe up in some of your northern states, yeah, it probably wouldn't hurt for sure.
Well, yeah, and this is definitely a northern states question, because in some areas we've learned, they never have to worry about those sorts of issues. So, all right. Well, I think that's all we have for today. And I just want to say thanks for attending, and Ron, thanks for your time. And if anyone has any additional questions, you can email us at info@privatewellclass.org. We also have a phone number you can call if you have questions. But thanks for attending, and have a good day.